Okay, we're recording now. Hi there and welcome to EcoFounder TV. You're here today with me, George Gray, and I'm joined with a very special guest today, Tom Talley. Tom writes for BusinessWeek and Forbes as well as Bloomberg. He is a tech guru who's founded a number of companies as well as an investor now. He's the author of How to Create the Next Facebook, his most recent book. And today he's going to share with us some insights for engineers and scientists going into the startup world. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Hey, thanks very much for having me.
Awesome. So for the listeners out there who may not be aware of you and your work, give us a little bit of background about your career and what you're working on right now.
Yeah, sure. So rewind 20 years ago is when I started, when I was an entrepreneur and started as an entrepreneur. Not a formal engineer, but I did, I think with there's a lot of engineers that aren't formal engineers anyway. They just kind of learn from doing stuff, and that's my thing. So I started, I just went to Barnes & Noble. There used to be bookstores back when I grew up, and I just got books on programming and learned to program and develop software to help students take exams. And it was one of the early e-learning companies. It was so early, it was before the internet, and then we went to the internet, one of the first e-learning companies on the internet as well. And then that did pretty well. We raised money for that. And then my partner really took over the company as CEO. I'm not really the CEO type. And then I helped start something called Hypermart, which is, I call the 1997 version of Tumblr. Timing is everything. 1997. You could have done anything. Fed.com on it. It'd have worked. You'd have made money. And Hypermart was the case. And we sold it to a company called GoToNet, which eventually became InfoSpace. And it turned out to be a huge win. The irony is that I think the exam company, which was called ExamWeb, is actually still around, was more successful, and we did more good with that. Our Hypermart, I think it was okay, but that made way more money, much more money than the ExamWeb company. And sometimes, I hate to say it, sometimes saving the world is a great thing and probably awesome. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make a lot of money from it, or the company you really think is going to provide a lot of value, may not provide you a lot of value. So that was a huge lesson for me that if you're in this just to make money, as they all say, it's probably not a good idea. You just see opportunity and see what you can do with that. Mm-hmm. And since then, I've been an investor, and just recently invested in a company. We were at a recent event for the Port Tech organization, and I saw one company. I invested in that company. So it's my first official clean tech investment called SafeSorb that I invested in. Most of my investments, as you can probably understand, is more on digital and mobile and those types of things. But I'm looking at clean tech because I do think there's some opportunity. It's an area that's had a lot of losses and a lot of bad things go on, but I think that's good for investors. Right. For opportunities. So those are things I do, and keep on learning and keep on going forward.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's an interesting point you brought up with the saving the world versus making money. Yeah. And I think, like you were saying, opportunity can be time can be a huge factor, with opportunity, can it? Like you said with was a Hypermart. The timing was perfect in 1997, like you said.
Yeah.
So that was partially due to its success.
Oh yeah. You still got to do it. You still got to show up. Woody Allen said, "Still got to show up." But I didn't know that was the right time or not. No one tells you. There's no, your calendar doesn't say, "Oh, this is the time to start a business." This right. is the type of business. There's no formula to any of this stuff. The e-learning was way too early.
Yeah,
we're talking 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Now in the last couple of years, it's the hottest thing. So if I had waited 18 years, I think it would have been a better outcome. So, you don't want to be way too early. You don't want to obviously be way too late. And in fact, um, the early companies a lot of times are not the ones that do well. I mean, Google was the hundredth plus search engine to hit the
Mm,
market, and they wound up being the top one, ever.
mhm.
So, um, being the first one on the block and is not. And whenever I hear the word pioneer or most innovative or I get scared because they're gonna, be the roadkill for the rest of the people who learn from those guys.
Right.
If you see it and you feel like, oh, I've missed the big opportunity, you probably haven't.
Mm,
You know.
yeah.
So just keep at it.
Yeah. So there was something that was brought up in that book that you recommended to me, um, from Zero to One, and we talked about the last mover advantage. And that
Yeah.
was yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
very counterintuitive, but so true.
yeah.
I mean, we weren't at Hypermart. We weren't the first company to allow you to create a free website. We weren't the best one. We timed it just very well. That's what we
Yeah.
did. So yeah.
So what kind of tips would you give for engineers and scientists looking to find that opportunity, or how do you know when it is timely to go into a certain space?
Yeah. Well, I would say earlier the better
Hmm.
when it comes to being an entrepreneur.
Hmm.
When I started, I was just me. I didn't have any obligations or responsibilities. I could just do whatever I wanted to do. As time goes by, it gets tougher. As if you have kids or
Yeah.
marriages or ex-wives or stuff like that, it makes it tougher. So no better time than the present. So I think just start now is when you start.
Right.
The As to where to go, I always think that, and this is what I've done in my thing, is that I always wanted a website. So I understood that helping other people create a website was a neat idea. I was terrible at exams.
Mm.
So I can't be the only one who's terrible at exams. And when I got into school in college, that was the point where students started to bring their laptops into the classroom. There was no internet then. I mean, there was no but they would play with their computers and take notes. And I thought, well, if all these kids have these computers and they're using these laptops for their school, why wouldn't they use their computers to help with their exams? So that was my inspiration.
Right.
So I think the thing is just like look at yourself. What are the things that you do? And I visited my mom recently, and she has a couple dogs. They're always on medicine, and she tries to put the pill in the cheese, and the dogs always figure out a way to spit it out. And she says, "Why can't they create like a cookie where you can put the pill in there?" And my mom has a problem. You
Yeah.
know, there's got to be a way to solve this thing. This happens all the time. So when you hear someone say, "God, that is such a pain in the ass. That's such a problem," pay attention. There
Yeah.
might be a business idea there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something that a lot of engineers and scientists, we kind of get caught up with creating the technology first rather than listening to the market.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, to balance the two, what are some tips you'd give there? Like you've
Yeah.
been maybe working on some research and you start to hear ideas, you kind of combine the two. Is that your sort of
Well,
philosophy?
I would say that people and companies don't buy technology; they buy products.
Hmm.
Um, and creating a new tech. Yeah, I see this all the time. People create technology and try to figure out what to do
Exactly.
with it,
Yeah. Yeah.
not see what's wrong with the world and create something to solve that problem. I think they have it completely upside down a lot of times for engineers. And again, and so you just look at just all the great companies and how they started. Yahoo is, a couple Stanford guys who wanted to find stuff on the internet, so they created a listing service, which was really basic, but it worked. Mark Andreessen, while he was at the university, he wanted a way, to browse all the stuff on the web. Couldn't find it, couldn't get to it. YouTube. You look at YouTube, and here's a case where you had people, digital film cameras were just starting to get going, and they wanted to make it easy to share videos with their friends. Mark Zuckerberg in his dorm room just wanted to know who was where and who was connected to who and what their interests were and stuff like that. Just open your eyes and see the world, but see it through the lens of seeing problems, and maybe I can solve it myself. And that's where the engineers are great, because that's what they're about, right? There's a problem. The Apollo 13 is in space. It's going crazy. The engineers put everything on the table and they figure out a solution. So I think that's what the way to go. The other way around, I think I've seen it so many times where, yeah, it's a great technology, but it's a great technology looking for a problem, and they really need to change it around. So it's like, get outside, look at the world, pay attention to what's going on. That's a huge part of the battle.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's so true. You don't want to get stuck in the hole trying to sell things that no one wants, right?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and they talk about these problems that they perceive that are out there, and they're not really problems. And you mentioned the book 0 to 1. Peter Thiel will say that it's got to be a 10x quantum leap change for people to change. People are notorious. We don't want to change. We don't, the average age of a car on the highway is 10 years old. I think the only thing we want to change or willing to change is our phones, our smartphones. Yeah. Everything else, we're very resistant to changing. So getting a person or a company to take the time to talk to you and to try something is really difficult. And I think really to get them on your side, you're going to have to show, solving a huge problem in such a significant way.
And that's what he talks about with the problems with clean tech, is that it's got to be a tenfold, like you say.
Yeah.
Which is difficult.
Yeah, and he recognizes that, right? So, Peter Thiel, the book we're talking about, he invested in SpaceX and Tesla. He was the co-founder of PayPal, and also the co-founder of Palantir. So he not only has digital background, but he has a clean tech background. Probably the two most successful, or some of the most successful startups in clean tech. It's hard to name the others. Yeah. I don't know what they are. But if you're looking at opportunities in clean tech, buy that book and go to that. It's one of the last chapters. It's a quick read.
Yeah, I think it's the second last. Yeah,
second to last chapter. And yeah, he says you need a huge improvement. It can't be incremental. But he also says, and this could be paradoxical too, is that finding smaller markets where you dominate a smaller market and you use that as the foothold to go big. And Tesla is an example of that. They went with the very high end Roadster car and tested it out and actually made money from it, and then they moved from there. So I think that's start with something that big advantage. Trying to figure out and the Tesla car is a huge improvement over a lot of cars, or at least people think that is. I mean, I've been a Tesla. I'm not a big car guy. It's a cool car. I'm not sure if I go out and buy spend all the money on one, but for people who really love cars, it's definitely a huge improvement. So yeah, for clean tech entrepreneurs, the company I invested in, I would just give you an example. The company I invested in called SafeSorb, they have an absorbent, and they're able to demonstrate more than a 10x improvement. Not only in that, because kitty litter is what they use right now to clean up these spills. So where you'd have to have 800 bags of kitty litter, now you have one. And it also means you have fewer need for bins to put that stuff in to dispose of it. And they have this customer banging on their door right now. And so I think trying for clean tech, got to figure out who your buyer is and why they're going to buy from you from the get-go. Because if you're just going to mess around with technology and try to figure that out later, you could be wasting a lot of time.
Yeah. And that's some of the topics that you talk about in your book, which I've got here, how to create the next Facebook, which you talk about a lot of business development tips for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So what are the key lessons that you might share from the book that apply to engineers and scientists going to the business development stage? You
Yeah.
mentioned that investors look for different things that may not be good for the business long term. So how do you balance that between creating, looking to impress investors and looking
Yeah.
to create a lasting company?
Yeah. Well, in terms of, well, I mean, if you're pitching to investors, you know, it's you want to get them into their greed mode,
Hmm.
and as much as possible, show them about the business, not so much the technology. The product and the business and the technology, maybe a little bit about it, but most of these investors are, they just want to know there's a huge opportunity here, and you're getting. There are signs here that you're being successful, and then again, there's a roadmap on who you're going to sell this to and why they're going to buy it from you.
Mm.
Uh, and then that just helps a huge amount because then they feel more comfortable and they start getting excited. So when I saw SafeSorb and I saw all the companies they were selling to and all the potential contracts that they could get, I got really excited. So I invested in the company. The other companies I took a look at, they had awesome technology. They just didn't show me, who's going to buy it and how they're going to get it into customers' hands. It's a
Right.
huge leap. It's a huge, people, new entrepreneurs underestimate it. When I started my e-learning company, I just thought people would just buy it, because it was cool, and realized that there's so much resistance out there, especially from education. We couldn't, it was a waste of time going to universities because they didn't understand. They just thought teaching should be done in the classroom with teachers. They didn't
Mm.
think a computer could do the work that they could do.
Right.
So that was like a no, So we had to go to exams because and go directly to students because they wanted to pass the exam. They were already using computers. So try to find, again, I think when it comes to business development, it's not necessarily getting the huge customer, but getting that customer where you can learn a lot from that customer,
Mm.
who can hopefully pay you a little money and build a presence and a foothold in a market. And it may be a niche, but you can grow that niche. And again, Peter Thiel in his book, you know, Facebook started in Harvard, and that's where they figured out the model, figured out what was working, and they went from there. So I think that for entrepreneurs, I think that kind of step-by-step thinking is the way to go. Yeah, you have a huge vision, it's a huge market opportunity, but you got to show investors. I think if you can show investors that you're getting traction, even in a small way,
Mm.
I think that can just be so helpful in getting funding. So.
Wow, thanks. Yeah, that was some amazing tips there, for anyone going into into business. And I think you were talking about the topics of that targeting that market niche. That's
Yeah.
something that I can forget the author's name now. Is it Jeffrey Moore talks about
Yeah.
in
Crossing the chasm.
Crossing the Chasm, and he talks
Yeah.
about dominating that small market niche and then expanding from there.
Right. Yeah. And then there's the Valley of Death,
Yeah.
so many companies where you have the hobbyists and the early adopters. And that's the
Yeah.
other thing to be careful about. That, yeah, you have a great product, but the market is so small and it can't go beyond that. So you could get easily seduced into a market and be in big trouble because the mainstream just won't won't be interested in it. So I think it's definitely a great book to read. And as to whether you cross that chasm, he doesn't really provide the best. He doesn't provide a formula. He just used
Mm.
different companies as examples where they were able to do that.
Yeah.
So it's high risk. This stuff's high risk, and you may come up with something. And it just may turn out to be a niche at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So you always have to be careful with that. But I still think if you go, I'll give you another example, personal example. I knew the guys at Insider Pages, and it was like a Yelp, but they started very horizontal.
Mm-hmm.
So they covered every city, whereas Yelp just started in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And Yelp is by far the biggest player, and Insider
Yeah.
Pages is really just who uses Insider Pages? I don't know if anyone uses that. So they thought, they went from that, but they knew that if they could succeed in San Francisco, probably a good chance it could succeed, work in New York City, Dallas, or LA. Now, could it work in Omaha? Not sure. But there's enough cities like San Francisco that you could probably make a pretty good market out of it. So I think the risk from going to San Francisco to New York is pretty low. Now, the risk from going to San Francisco to Omaha, definitely bigger, but it's still conceivable that it can work. And of course, it does work. People like Yelp and they use it. And so I think, that's where when you're making that argument to investors, you got to put it in those terms that, it's not just going to be San Francisco. It's going to be so many different cities, and you look at all the different people. But we got to make sure we get it right, and we understand the formula that and repeat it. And that's what they did. Once they got it, then they just started repeating it from city to city.
And that's how it spreads.
Well, same with Uber too.
Right.
Started in San Francisco, figured it out, and then they moved from city to city.
Yeah. And those services are still spreading, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. All around the world.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for that. And we like to finish up these interviews with one last final question, which you haven't probably prepared for because I didn't warn you about it. No, it's just what's one thing that you know now that you didn't know when you were starting out that you'd wish you'd known?
Oh, just one?
Yeah, one thing.
There's so much. There's so much.
Well, what's the most important thing that you maybe have found?
I would I was at the way I was an entrepreneur and started is I just did things. I saw something I thought was an opportunity. I didn't think too much about it, and I just did it. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. A couple of years ago, when LinkedIn went public, the night it priced, I was at the offices of Yammer, which is kind of the link. That's kind of like the Facebook for the enterprise that sold to Microsoft, and it was actually part of David Sachs created that company, and he was the COO at PayPal with Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and all those guys. Those guys, and they all went on to start all these great companies, the PayPal mafia, right? And so I talked to David Sachs that night, and I go, like, what is it with you guys? Is it the water you drink? Are you taking drugs or whatever? I mean, you guys just have this thing where you create these breakout companies and dominate industries and make billions of dollars. And I just want to know what it is. Just tell me, please. Tell me what it is. And he said, you know what? He says, before you start a business, figure out distribution. Figure it out. And he goes, that's the one thing company, again, it goes back to what we talked about before, but that resonated so much with me. Now, if I heard that when I was young, I probably would say, whatever, I don't care. I probably would still not have listened. That's the other thing about taking advice, young entrepreneurs, there's that, which is great, because I think that attitude of kind of, changing things and doing things on your own is great. But I think, that piece of advice is some of the best advice I could give to an entrepreneur. And it's not even my advice. It comes from David Sachs and these guys at PayPal who have proven over and over again that this works. And my e-learning experience, while I did see a lot of students use computers, I didn't think about how hard it was to get my software on their computers.
Right.
And had I thought about that, I may have done something differently. Right. And that business did okay, but it really wasn't the big business. The big business was Hypermart, which we figured out distribution really early on, and it turned into something pretty big. But that'd be the advice I would give. And it's probably more so for engineers and those who are technical, because you're so focused on the product and the technology, you just think, you could just sit back and, all of a sudden, people just love what you have and buy it. So that's what I mean.
So channels to market and distribution.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Tom, for joining us.
Well, thank you.
And yeah, I'm sure everyone's got a lot out of today's interview. Cool. If people wanted to find out more about your work, where would they find you?
That's a great question. If you go to Forbes or go to Google, and just type in my name, or go to Forbes and go to Google. You'll see my recent articles. That gives you a really good idea of the kind of stuff I do. If you have a question, you can always email me at ttaulli@gmail.com. So I don't have really a personal. I have a LinkedIn thing, but I don't put much on there. So most of my stuff is if you go and just type Google News and type my name, you'll find my articles and stuff I do for Forbes and so forth like that. So that's probably the easiest way.
Awesome. And also, Tom's got their book out on Amazon as well.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, I have a couple as well. We could also have a little raffle if you want for some of your users, and I can send them out if that's of interest as well.
Yeah, for sure. What
Okay.
do you have in mind?
Yeah, I'll send like maybe like 3 copies of my book, and just yeah, I don't know how you want to figure out who gets the copy, but it'll be free copy, and
Okay.
I can get those out when you determine from your formula.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how about we have a comment on this blog post, because this video is going to be on the blog post. So how about we have whoever posts. What should we have as a comment? You put me on the spot now. I'm trying to think you've given us a wonderful offer. Yeah, let's go for just the biggest. Whoever has the comment for the biggest lesson they've learned from this interview.
Okay.
And we'll pick it. Tom and I will just we'll choose which is the most insightful, and we'll award the books that way.
Okay.
Awesome.
Sounds great.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us, Tom. And that wraps up another episode of EcoFounder TV. If you're watching this from YouTube, you can check out the blog post in the description below. And make sure you subscribe. Thank you.